Mimi Joseph says, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you and a Happy New Year to you as well. The Oyo and Ife thing is really getting out of hand as many versions of Yoruba history are now online. Please talk about it soon. I will. I will. Do you know why I don't like talking about Oyo matter? Is because so when I talk about I talk about Oyo in history, right? So I'm not about the history of Oyo. I talk about the history of Oyo because, like I said, nothing can erase the greatness of Oyo. The clowns who are trying to add to the greatness are the ones who are actually diminishing it. But I don't think it can be diminished unless, of course, I think I should add a caveat. Nothing can diminish the greatness of Oyo unless people try to add to it and make it what it wasn't in the name of trying to prop it up. That would diminish its greatness. So historically, there are things that Oyo did that, it's just done, right? And it's important to acknowledge it. It's also Obu as Yoruba people, and there are mistakes that Oyo made that will teach all of us lessons as Yoruba people that we can all learn from. I mean, just about every town in Yorubaland has had something good and maybe a mistake they made, and we all learn from it and go and move on. But these revisions that are going on, it's a shame. In 2025, people are not acknowledging greatness; they are inventing greatness. That's a shame. But yeah, we'll talk about some of those things when the time comes. The reason I like talking about it a lot is because I don't want to seem like I'm, because it happens every time. I receive a lot of videos every time. I don't want to seem as if I'm upping on everything because it will look like infighting. However, it's also important to set the record straight, not to fight, just to set the record straight. For instance, I heard one person, somebody sent me said the person is a historian, and anybody can give themselves titles these days. Excuse me. He says he's a historian, and he says that Alaafin is the Alaafin of Yorubaland, all of Yorubaland. And I said, and you call that person a historian? I says, yes. That's a joker. That's a joker. I just think as Yoruba people, let's celebrate greatness. Let's celebrate greatness. Let's acknowledge what great things we've done, and let's be inspired by history to do better than what was done in the past, and also to learn not to make the same mistakes of our forebears. That we should do. What we should not do is to rewrite history in order to prop up certain people. And let me say something. I say it a lot, I'll say it again. If you as a Yoruba person, I don't care what town you are from, what city, what local village, whatever. If you as a Yoruba person want to tell your story or the history of your people, and you begin with the British colonization, you are not thinking straight. There's something fundamentally wrong with your thinking process or with your thought process. You cannot start Yoruba's history in the 1800s. You can't. We are an ancient people, and we don't drop our civilization because of British came. So we're going to go with what British said. Meanwhile, what British said, that I'm Ile-Ife. So there's no two ways about it. I'm an Ile-Ife man. I'm from the royal family of Ife. So people say, you are from Ife, you will not be objective. It's because you're not thinking straight. Where you are from is not what determines objectivity. I'm from Ife. What the British said about Ife is documented. But I don't think you need that to determine the greatness of Ife. That's the point I'm trying to make. What the British said about Ife is documented. What they did, what happened in 1903 when the Ooni first left the palace, the first time the British representative, what did they do? How was it taken to to Lagos? What happened? When you study all these things, right, you appreciate it. But the truth is that the legitimacy of the Ooni is not predicated on what happened in 1903, even though what happened in 1903 also adds to who he is. But the point is that that seat is an ancient seat. It's very old. So I can't start the history in the 18th century or the 19th century, 19th century or the 20th century, when there's over 1,000 years history of Yorubaland. So I hear this nonsense about, oh, when Oyibo came, the Queen made somebody Kinikon. The Queen did not make anybody anything. And the treaty they signed. And let's give God praise, this our generation. There's hardly any book that they talk about that is not available in public. Because if only a certain group of people have access to these treaties, we are done for. Anybody can just change history and say, oh, see, this is what they said. But thank God, the document is available. Everybody has access to it. So we know exactly what happened. And we respect all kings. But no, we don't. Number one, we don't allow disrespect to the Ooni. I don't care who you are. I don't bloody care I don't care who you are. You are not going to disrespect Ooni. I don't care who you are. And it's not because I'm from Ife, it's because I'm Yoruba. And if you're a Yoruba person, you will think that way as well. If anybody disrespects your source and you celebrate it, you are dead. Physically, you would be alive, oh, but everything that makes you you is dead. I want to say something. I want to sound a note of warning. You know, when you read about Yoruba civilization and our myth and our identity, when people begin to speak against Ife and say things like, oh, I saw something on social media today and I was shocked. I wasn't angry. I was shocked. Young Yoruba people saying things about Kabesi and saying things and typing things on in the comment sections across different social media platforms. I was like, there's no fear. I mean, on all sides, but particularly directing at Ooni, there's no fear. Forget what I mean fear. I'm not saying fear of something will happen to you, but reverence. There's no kosio war. And the reason they are doing that is because the people they look up to are disrespecting somebody, so they're also disrespecting. But let me tell you what usually happens. Once you do that, the kings who do that to the Ooni, right, and whose followers do that to the Ooni, what they don't know is that that king himself has become Alawa Dediye. What is Awadomodi? You know, all the king needs to do is what my father used to tell me to do when I was a lot younger. My father would say, Wenye. Let's say we're talking about something and maybe I'm not getting the point. This was, especially when I was in high school, my dad would say, Wenye. And what it means is that there are people coming from behind and they see what you are doing. You'll be they won't disrespect you. They will drag you on the floor. They will drag your honor, your title, your crown, your person, everything about you will be dragged. That's why even when you don't agree, when you disagree with elders, there's a way you say it. Even from a selfish perspective, if you dishonor them, you are planting a seed of dishonor for yourself. So all this nonsense that people are doing, and there's some people, I don't know, Koti Kadun, the only time you hear news from some places is of supremacy. On top of what? Nothing. There's nothing. There's nothing. There was something, but there is nothing. So you fight everybody based on what was. I know the crazy part. Before your own was, some others were. But your own history doesn't begin with what has happened before you suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. So when you woke up, or maybe you woke up at 12 noon, when you woke up, that's your morning, praise God. But now that you are awake, as far as you are concerned, everybody also woke up at 12 noon. People have been working since Idaji. Civilizations have been built. Empires have risen and fallen. You just came around. You just woke up. That was it. It's 6 p.m. already. You are celebrating what happened in the afternoon. It doesn't make. I don't know what people actually get from this. It reeks of inferiority complex. You're trying to tell everybody that lived before 12 noon that what you did between 12 and 2 is what determines what happening right now at 6 p.m. Even though what they did before you was even greater than what you did. But guess what? They're not even telling you that they're greater than you. They only tell you that there's a stroke, there's an order. And just because you woke up at that point doesn't mean that you are the father of all. You are the father of your own children. And I think at some point the governors will have to maybe call some, I don't know. Olubadan had to speak last week now. When Olubadan said, is Olubadan of Ibadan? He said his territory, his jurisdiction is Ibadan. He was not talking about himself. He was talking to somebody. When he said his jurisdiction was Ibadan, don't go beyond your bounds. That's what he was saying. And thankfully, the chairmanship of the chiefs in the committee, the chiefs committee in Oyo State, is rotating. It's rotational now. You know what? Let me play you something. I've not played it here before. I don't know if I'll quickly find it. I always say quickly because I always think of what I used to save it. Mumbo, I'll see if I can find you something. Give me a second. You know, before now, there was a permanent chairman. So there was a permanent chairman of House of Chiefs from the 1940s or 50s all the way to the end of the First Republic. And then when Western region was broken, the man was still the person was still the permanent chief of Western State, even when Lagos was excised out of it and Midwest was taken out of it. Then when the states were created in 76, where you had Oyo State and Oyo State, Ogun State and Ondo State, the same king became the permanent chairman of the kings in Oyo State. And then there was Osun State in 1991. And then the same king I'm talking about is the Ooni. The Ooni has been the permanent king of all the kings in Western region, in Western State, in Oyo State. But before they created Osun State in 91, something actually happened in Oyo State. I'll see if I can find you that video. I want you to listen to something that happened. So the king who was the permanent chairman in Western region, Western State, Oyo State, up until 1980 was Obade Sojaderemi, because he reigned from 1930 to 1980, was there for 50 years. In 1980, we had a new king, Oba Okwade, who reigned until 2015. Now, it was when he became king that this whole thing started happening. Just give me about a minute and then we can get into it. You're going to like this. There's a video, I've never played it here before, but it shows you another angle to this conversation. And it's important to mention it. Just done. Oh, fantastic. We're good. In 1930, Obade Sojaderemi was crowned the Ooni of Ife. And he was king up until 1980. So he was king for 50 years. While he was king, the House of Chiefs was established first they started with the Conference of Chiefs in 1937. And of course, the Ooni, was the chairman of the Council of Chiefs in Yorubaland, Yoruba Council of Chiefs. This is not even about Western region. You had the Western region and the Midwest. Obade Sojaderemi, the Ooni of Ife, was also the permanent chairman of the Western region. After the Midwest, before the Midwest was taken out of the Western region, it was the chairman. After the Midwest was broken off, he remained the chairman of the Western region of the House of Chiefs, or the Kings in Western region, permanent chairman. 1967, Lagos was cut off from the Western region. He still remained the permanent, the permanent chairman. 1976, the Western State was then divided. So we had Western region and we had Western State when Lagos State was created. So we had Lagos State, Western State, Midwest State in 67. Then in 76, the Western State was further divided into three. We now had Ogun State, Oyo State, and Ondo State. The permanent chairman of the Kings in Oyo State was still the Ooni. All the way to 1980. Then Baba Waja, he passed on, and then we now had a different king. That's Oba Okwade, who became Ooni in 1980. And then the tussle began. Now, before I go on, let me first say this. In Yoruba history, we don't have records of any Alaafin speaking against the Ooni. We have records, for instance, of a prince who misbehaved before he became the Ooni. That's the Aole. But he didn't do what he did as the prince. All right, and what he did caused a lot of wala that led to war. But that's not today's conversation. But we don't really have Alaafins. Once they become king, they don't get into this thing of supremacy or part or so. And to make matters very clear, whatever Oyo became, it became in the 1600s. And whatever it became, it stopped becoming in the 1800s. The reign of Oyo as an empire was for 200 years, which is a lot. But the reign of Ife as an empire was for 400 years, which is even much more. And that was from the 11th century to the 15th century. That's one. Number two, the cities and kingdoms that went out of Ife, one of them happens to be Oyo itself. So we don't have situations where the king, the Alaafin, would speak against Kabesi, would speak against the Ooni and say, oh, we have part also. And Oyo, the royalty of Oyo, is a product of Ife. So all these things that they're even doing is nauseating to start with. So nobody really gets into this stuff. When the issue of part also began was actually in the 1980s, from the foundation of Yoruba as a people. When kings say, because number one, do you even see the Ooni that you want to tell that you are bigger than? The first time anybody saw Ooni outside Ife was in 1903. If you read this book, 201 Gods, A City of 201 Gods by Jacob Olukbono, you read about the episode that happened when the Ile-Ife and the Akarigbo, the Ile-Ife wanted to be crowned, and then the Akarigbo said it couldn't be crowned because that crown was not from Ife. And Akarigbo, who is Norman Shagam, they traced, they are Remo people, they traced their ancestry to Iremo quarters in Ife. And so they were telling the Ile-Ife that he couldn't become king. All this thing went all the way to Governor MacGregor, and finally they were able to they had to get the Ooni to come and settle the matter. And for that to happen, many things were done. From town to town, there were sacrifices. And all the kings in Yorubaland vacated their palaces, not the throne, their palaces. You know what? I think we should start from there. Again, this is not to even say, this is where legitimacy is coming from. It's just to explain that Shebi and Toba you are I read the other when we're discussing this whole Benin thing, I remember reading the other time that whenever a king passes in Benin, regardless of whatever they're doing right now, this is history. Whenever a king passes in Benin, or at least back in the day, they will send an emissary to travel all the way to Ife, right? Toba Defe, will come and tell them what has happened. Maybe they have chosen a new king and so on and so forth. He will now collect a bronze mask from Ife. But before collecting that bronze mask, he has to know if the Ooni favors, if the Ooni is favorably disposed to the news that he brought. And the only way he would know was to see the Ooni's foot. No one will see his face. There was a curtain parting him from the people. So, tí Ooni bá ṣí aṣọ tó bá fẹsẹ̀ hàn, that's the good news for the emissary from Benin. Omi pé, ó túmọ̀ sí wípé, you know, the Kabiyesi, that's the Ooni, is favorably disposed to whatever they have done in Benin. And then they will now give him, you know, bronze mask and stuff like that. They will not take away. But that, we're not talking about Benin today. The point I'm just trying to make is that you couldn't even see him. And if you couldn't see him, there's no way on earth you'll be dragging superiority with him. And to Barry the Rojo one. The first time that order changed was 1903, when we had Olubadan the first Adelekon. After him was Obade Sojaderemi that I'm talking about, that became king in 1930. So I'm going to get you that book and read something to you. I want to read what happened in 1903. Like I always say, without this, I mean, there are many things that happen, but what I'm trying to do is to tell you that. Umbo, 1 second. What I'm trying to tell you is that the person you couldn't see, you could even be dragging supremacy with, because number one, he's not someone that you can easily find around. So in the 1800s, I think I said this the other day, when Henry Higgins visited Oyo, the Alaafin, man, there are many things I'm saying at the same time. Give me a second. I'll open that one as well. I'll start. Let's take it date by date. If you take it Daru, in fact, you listen to it, and it's Obe Sidaru in the 1980s. We're going to get there. You're going to listen to something. You're going to listen to an interview. Let me tell you what it is right now, so that let's keep that one in the cooler. Let's take it one step and then the other. Found it. Okay. So let's start with this one. Yeah, I was right. 1886. In 1886, British agents visiting the Yoruba interior. I'm reading a book called A History of the Yoruba People by Stephen Banji Akintoye. In 1886, British agents visiting the Yoruba interior were told by the Alaafin of Oyo that the Ifes were the fathers of all, and all people came from Ife. That the chiefs of Ife at the Soya, where they and their people were camped outside the ruins of their city, that the Ife people were the fathers of all tribes, and that if they continued longer in a camp and unable to resettle the ancient city of Ile-Ife, the whole world would spoil, as they were the priests of the deities who ruled the world. And by the Seriki of the Jebu, Chief Ogunsigun, that even the English king can be shown the spot at Ile-Ife from where his ancestors went out. Henry Higgins, the leading British agent in this 1886 mission, summed up his information about Ife as follows. There are all manner of legends as to the wonder to be... I'll take that again. There are all manner of legends as to the wonders to be seen at Ile-Ife. The Ifes call themselves the conservators of the world and the oldest of mankind, and boast that all crowned personages in the world, including the white man's sovereign, went out originally from Ile-Ife. And it was curious the deference with which other tribes treat them. Other tribes mean other Yoruba tribes. It was curious, and other people generally. When they say other tribes, they're not talking about Nigerian tribes and not the way we use tribes now. It was curious the deference with which other tribes treat them, although they were at war with them. And as everyone was supposed to be a descendant of the Ife, they looked upon all strangers who visited their town in the light of pilgrims who came, as they put it, to make their house good. That is, to pay reverence to departed ancestors. Here's the point. The lowest that Ife got was in the 1800s. In the 1880s, when there was war. There was not supposed to be a war, no attacks on Ife, but like I said, it's not today's topic. And I've said that a number of times, not to the topic, because I don't want to change into that. They're not supposed to fight Ife, but they fought. And parts of Ife was in ruins. Different parts of Ife were in ruins at the time. So that was Ife at its lowest, not at its highest, not at its peak, not at its zenith, at its lowest. The Alaafin said they cannot remain in the camp, because if they remain in the camp for longer than they have remained there, and the city remains in ruins, the old world will spoil. This was in 1886. So I'm telling you that even when things were don't think on budget, where you be like, you can disrespect them, that even then they were not. This man said even when they were fighting war with them, they still had this reverence and deference with which they treated Ife. So here's the question: if they did that at Ife's worst, what do you think they did at Ife's best? Let me read one of the things that happened after this 1886 episode. I'm going to read from a book called, City of 201 Gods, Ile-Ife in Time, Space and the Imagination by Jacob Olubadan. In the history of Ile-Ife, 1903 was an earth-shattering year for the Yoruba people. It was the year that the Ooni, the god king of the Yoruba, encountered directly the full impact of British modern colonial rule. From the perspective of the Ooni and from the perspective of the colonial governor in Lagos, the year ended the preceding era and opened a new investiture for Ile-Ife city and the Yoruba states of southwestern Nigeria. Although the governor, Sir William McGregor, referred cursorily to the occasion as the Great Crown Case, to Ooni Adelekun Olubuse I, 1894 to 1910, and to the Yoruba people, it was a precedent-setting great journey, because it marked the first time in the history of Ile-Ife that an Ooni would venture out of his palace and beyond the center of the universe. For Westerners, the occasion would have been tantamount to asking God to leave heaven to answer the call of a mere mortal. The Ooni traveled to Lagos, the then center of British regional administration. For the Yoruba, news of the unprecedented journey provoked fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, because it was a great taboo for the Ooni to vacate the sacred city of Ile-Ife, to travel to another seat of power, however that power might be defined. Therefore, symbolically, the journey of the Ooni signified the capitulation of tradition to modernity and of religious authority to secular authority. However, the events for which the Ooni was invited to Lagos were as remarkable as the journey itself, for they symbolized the colonial government's attempt to impose traditional rule as a mechanism of the British indirect rule system. I'm going to jump some things because of time. Let me read the letter that was sent to the Kabiyesi in 1902 first, and we'll read the other things. In a letter dated April 18, 1902, the governor of Lagos ordered the clerk of the Central Native Authority in Lagos to write to the Ooni, asking that the Ooni provide at his earliest convenience a list of Obas and chiefs who have the right to wear the crowns originally when leaving Ife. The governor sent the request because of a dispute between the Ile-Ife of Ekpe, a town in Shagamu district, and the Akarigbo of Shagamu, now Ijebu-Remo, over who had the right to wear the sacred beaded crown that originated in Ile-Ife, and thus the legitimacy to rule. Akarigbo of Shagamu claimed primacy over the entire Ijebu-Remo district and refuted the right of the Ile-Ife of Ekpe to wear the crown. Although the Ooni compiled and sent to the colonial office in Lagos a handwritten list of about 44 titles, the governor invited Ooni to visit Lagos to help resolve the dispute over which the two Obas was sovereign. In 1903, the importance of the Ooni's visit was the ancient authority of Ile-Ife as the sacred center were underscored in the governor's note to him. Quote, this is what the governor wrote: as the question is engaging presently the attention of the Central Native Council, and to enable them to arrive at a definite conclusion in the matter, it is important that they be placed in possession of your report on this important question as the recognized head of Yorubaland. That's a letter that McGregor wrote to the Ooni Adelekun in 1902. For those who are using British as the beginning of history, by the way, we're not starting with British, we're just trying to make a point. He says, I'm going to read again what the governor said. As the question is engaging presently the attention of the Central Native Council, and to enable them to arrive at a definite conclusion in the matter, it is important that they be placed in possession of your report on this important question as the recognized head of Yorubaland, who has the right of issuing crowns. So he said they should make that thing available at an early date. In describing his journey to Lagos, the Ooni emphasized only religious and political aspects of the trip, although he observed great apprehension in the people of Ile-Ife. Indeed, in the people throughout the entire land of the Yoruba. Many of his subjects accompanied him to the distant river Ashejire that forms the boundary between Ile-Ife and the land of the Ibadan people, and many vowed to remain there until he returned unharmed to Ile-Ife. All across the land, listen to this please, pay attention everyone. I'm reading City of 201 Gods, Ile-Ife in Time, Space and Imagination by Jacob Olubadan. All across the land, including the region of the Alaafin of Oyo, the Ooni observed that the Yoruba Oba began to vacate their thrones. Astonishingly, they remained outside the gates of their cities. I'll take that again. All across the land, including the region of the Alaafin of Oyo, the Ooni observed that the Yoruba Oba began to vacate their thrones. Astonishingly, they remained outside the gates of their cities, waiting until the Ooni's safe return. A time of great dread fell upon the land as the Oba feared that the Ooni's departure could bring devastation. Clearly, the Yoruba held their Ooni in great esteem. The British governor confirmed that he had received a telegram from the Alake of Abeokuta, one of the principal Oba in Yorubaland, inquiring about the time that the Ooni would return home so that the Alake could meet him outside the walls of Abeokuta in order to pay his respects to the Ooni to ensure a successful journey to Lagos. The Ooni performed sacrifices all along the journey. Accompanied by a large entourage of wives, musicians, chiefs, and servants, the Ooni arrived in Lagos on February 23, 1903. He was lodged at Tinubu Square and he held his first meeting with the governor McGregor on February 24. The historic meeting between the governor and the Ooni indicated that both were exploring mutual benefit. We're going to stop here from the word go. The place called Oyo, the kingdom that we now call Oyo Kingdom, not even this one, the original one, was founded by the grandson of Oduduwa. That's the beginning. So whether there was a British colonization or not, that's the history. Our history did not begin with British incursion into Yorubaland. Oromiyan was a grandson of Oduduwa who traveled to Benin, gave birth to Eweka, who became the Oba of Benin, whose descendants are still the kings of Benin, then traveled to Oyo and created the kingdom in Oyo by putting together all the settlements and then becoming their first king, before returning to Ife, where he eventually became the Ooni. That's the beginning of Oyo as a city-state. Okay? Now, from then on, nobody had anybody talking anyhow about anybody. So I'm going to jump from there all the way to the 1800s. So the very foundation tells you that the grandson of Oduduwa created the kingdom, which is Oyo. That's the first thing. And the political system that they used in Oyo is the exact same system that started in Ife. Whether it was the structure of the king, of the king's cabinet, the political structure of the whole place, the idea of Iwarefa becoming Oyomesi in Ife, in Oyo, you know, the way he organized his cabinet, the place of the judiciary, the place of the Ogboni, all those things were a copy of the model in Ife, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're somebody's son and you went somewhere and you replicate what you have at home, there's no sin in that. You have a right to it. So this is not a jab, it's just the fact. Okay, so it was essentially, and it wasn't the only one that did it. Oromiyan did it in Oyo. Ogunfunminire did it in Eko, in Isheri. Then that spread all the way to Eko. Obanta did it in Ijebu. It was replicated in different parts. Okay, Now, so there's always that respect for Ife. I'm going to jump many centuries because, to be honest, in those centuries, there's no record of anybody insulting Ife and say Kinikon. Even when Ife stopped being powerful in terms of economy, it still had cultural and religious supremacy, so to speak. So, there was economy, there was politics, there was culture, and there was religion. Those were the four main things. And that's why when people say that Ife is the spiritual capital, I get what they are saying, but it is just one of the things that makes Ife home to all of us. The shrine is not your home. Ife houses all the primary gods of Yorubaland. But that does not mean that that's all it is, or that's all it's... the ascendancy that Ife, again, and we're going to do a series on this in January by the grace of God, you will see economic power, you see political power, you will see religious power, and you see cultural power. The cultural power is where you have how people became kings, where you got your staff of office from, where you got your crowns from. It had to be Ife. And it was tied to the economic power, which was the glass beads, Shegi and Inyo. And that was a product of the political power that was established by, and the structure that was established by Oduduwa himself. And that's linked to the religious power, which created the structure of religion in Yorubaland as we know it today. Whether is the way they organized different religious orders, including Ife itself as a religious order and the divination system, all those things happen in Ife at the height of it, and everything was then replicated in different Yoruba cities and towns all across the space. And that's why you see all of us calling Ife a home. It was a place where civilization emanated from. They were discussing philosophy. I've said it several times. Think about people having a school over 1,000 years ago teaching divination and philosophy. That's what they were doing at a place called Oketase. Listen, the place is still in Ife today. It's very close to Orisun FM. There's a radio station very close to it in Ife. On that hill, people would these were students. It wasn't everybody going there, but students will be there. They learn divination, they learn Yoruba philosophy. They were doing that. For people to be having philosophy classes over 1,000 years ago, you know that they had an advanced civilization. And this is not made up, by the way. And I said I'll discuss this as well when we're discussing Oromila. And like I always say, when we get into those things, let me tell you something. For a Yoruba person, the first thing you have to do for your life to understand Yoruba well, take your mind off this religion thing and just study it as it is. You'll be wowed by the personality of certain people of our heroes and the things they accomplished. If you're a religious person, do your religion. But if you're a Christian, just take it away from the faith. Just look at it as history. If you're a traditional worshiper, look at it as history. As a Muslim, look at it as history. You'll be wowed at the extent of the things they did. A people who could organize schools and teach themselves, the school is what Akin Jogbin called the Kedu, and teach themselves things and study. How the Yoruba got their name? You see the stuff right from the 5th century, that's 400 AD. You have to really understand how this thing linked to even appreciate it. Listen, 336 or 386? When was the Council of Nicaea organized? Mambo, I want to make a point. You will see how these things are linked. Because if you look at Yoruba history in isolation, Mambo, 325. Council of Nicaea was in 325 AD. That was when the New Testament was canonized. Or the Old Testament was already being used. There was Septuagint before then. This was in the 4th century AD, right? Constantine had become a Christian. Things were happening in Rome and in Constantinople in Turkey. By the 5th century AD, that's 400 and something. I'm not talking about 15th century, 5th century. We're in the 21st century. So I'm talking about 1,600 years ago. Yoruba people were trading with people in Mali. If you ask me for the source, I already provided it. How the Yoruba got their name, Simibanji Akintoye. If we have to read it, we'll read it later. That's where you are from as a Yoruba person. That's your lineage. 1,600 years ago, your ancestors were engaging in international trade. And the base of that, majority of them were going out of Ife. And this was even before the political system was eventually created in the 900 to 1000 AD. That's 10th to 11th century AD. A people like that and would have had a civilization evolve over time and created something that everybody that was connected to that place would be proud of, which is why we call Ife what we call it today. Which is why our myth revolve around that place. And the more you study the history of Ife and the history of Yoruba people, the more you understand the reason they had to create those myths at the time. Even if you're a Christian, the reason they had to create that myth, and one of the primary reasons was to give us a sense of identity. You're not just floating through this world. It's the exact same thing they did in China, where they made it look, and in fact they said it, that middle China, that was the middle of the earth. The world, the earth revolved around China. That was the Chinese mindset. Well, that was the Yoruba mindset as well. The world revolved around Ife. That's why Higgins was saying in 1886 that these people believe that all the sovereigns, all the kings of every part of this world came out of Ife. Henry Higgins was a British official saying this in 1886. This is the way these people think. They think that everybody came out of them. Because they were advanced. That's why they say, every time we have sessions here, I say we'll meet every day, Monday to Friday, every weekday, 4 p.m. Ife time. The reason I say Ife time, I've been saying it for a very long time. The reason I use the word Ife time is because in our own consciousness, we say Ibitojumo Timowa, Ile-Ife, Ibitojumo Timowa. It talks about civilization, but literally it means that's where the day dawns. In other words, everything is connected to that in terms of progress, civilization, advancement. So that by 1886, when Higgins met with the Alaafin, he was saying that, listen, there was a war, the city is in ruins, Ife is at its worst now. But guess what? We have to do something about these people. We have to find a way to resettle them, because if we don't resettle them, the old world will spoil. The whole world will spoil. That's what the Alaafin said in 1886. That's at its worst. 1903, when the Ooni was invited to Lagos by Governor William McGregor, all the kings in Yorubaland, including the Alaafin, left their palaces. Why? Why? Because it was seen as a taboo for the Ooni to leave. I mean, the writer said asking the Ooni to leave Ife is like asking God to leave heaven. So everybody had to leave their palaces, not just to live in their towns. They had to go outside the gates of their cities. In other words, they had to live in another city until Ooni returned. This is the person that this is a stool. By the way, when we use Ooni is not a person. It's an office. That's why when I see these retards, and you have to be a retard to go around saying the Ooni was somebody's slave, and you are a retard. When you say things like the Ooni was somebody, you don't understand. The Ooni is not a person. It's an office. It doesn't matter. A 5-year-old, of course, the 5-year-old cannot become king, but even a 5-year-old becomes the Ooni, it becomes my father. It becomes our father, because he's not there based on his age. That's why you see the Ooni sitting, and someone like Chief Obasanjo, who can give birth to him as far as biology is concerned, age-wise, would prostrate, because it's not about the man, it's about the stool, the throne. So what will make all these kings leave is because of the sacredness of their throne. And nobody will speak against that throne, because that's their source. That's where they call home. Please, if you're on TikTok, don't stop our tapping. If you're on YouTube, please like the live and share as well. Thank you very much. That's why they call it home. You don't spoil your home. You get the point. So this one is never Ojori, is about your source. And gbigbe is not that you will cease to exist, it's that your influence, your value will whittle away. People will, and by the way, stories are going to come out. I mean, listen, I don't like to weaponize history towards anybody, not, I mean, let alone Yoruba people or Yoruba city. But at some point, some things will be said, just so that everybody knows their place. So we've read what happened in the ancient, we've discussed what happened in the ancient times. We talked about what happened in the 19th century. We talked about what happened in the 20th century. Now let's talk about what happened later on in the 20th. So we'll talk about 1903. Let's talk about what happened in the 1980s. In the 1980s, so Oba Lamidi Adeyemi had become king in the 1970s. And then the Ooni was made king in 1980. That's Ooni Okunade. Now, if you remember what I said earlier, all the while, the permanent chairman of the House of Chiefs has been the Ooni. He was even the first governor of Western State. But this Ojaderemi was the very first governor of Western Region. Right? Region. Was the first governor of Western Region. So, he was even in Parliament in 1950. When they were discussing the case of the North, 1951, when they were discussing the case of the North having 50% of the seats in Parliament, the Ooni was the one who spoke for Western Region as a representative of his own people. And the things he said, thankfully, the records of that legislative debate is here. And if we have to read it, we'll read it. Okay? So 1980, Oba Okunade becomes king. And then the scheming started. Now, I'm going to play you something from the son of a major king in Ibadan. It's called Oba Ashanke. I was a child when Oba Ashanke was still king. And I think it was probably the funniest king I've ever heard in my life. He used to say a lot of things, I think the son here is probably going to refer to some of those things. But he talked about how, for the first time, by the way, a king in Yorubaland, especially in Oyo, would be... Oyo is important because not only, forget about the empire thing, you are a direct descendant of that throne. How exactly are you going to cast aspersions on that throne? It was unheard of. But somebody changed that tradition. And let me say something before I play what I'm about to play. To his credit, before he passed on, he tried to mend things. To his credit. Especially because the king after Oba Okunade, who is our present Ooni of Ife, Ojaja, Oba Enitogunwusi, he wasn't about supremacy battle. And they were able to mend fences and, you saw, if you noticed everything that happened before Oba Lamidi Koto Waja, there was Irekpo, there was friendship, there was mutual respect, there was although of course also Baba not Dagba, so there was no reason for those things. So to his credit, those things came down. But here's the problem. If you spend 40 years doing something and you then change towards the end, the good people will acknowledge what you have done in terms of the fact that you have changed, you have gone back to how things should be. But the bad people will hold on to the things that you did as president. So that becomes the basis of the actions, saying that she being combined or she, and I bet you were there. Meanwhile, this person has quote unquote repented. Has changed them. By the way, repentance just means to change your mind. You make a U-turn. He has changed his mind, but and if you will be able to hold on to it and say, she been combined or she. But Koto Sheye, I want to play it today. I've not played it before. I want to play it. I want to listen to the schemings. That's what you can call it. Alude Akpade Koto Sheye láàrin Ọba Alaafin àná àti Olubadan. Ṣé jẹta ni àbí jẹ wà torí bàbá ẹmọ kó àwọn Ìbàdàn ọba máa ń pẹ́ náà kó tó dọba, so it happens like that. So there was an interview where his son talked about that matter. I'm going to find it for you, and we'll listen to. All right, please take a listen to the prince from Olubadan, the son of Oba Ashanke, the past Olubadan. Take a listen, please.
Ọ̀rọ̀ nípa pé ká mọ sún ipò alága àwọn lọ́balọ́ba nípínlẹ̀ Ọ̀yọ́. Wọ́n ní b'Aláàfin bá jẹ, k'Olúbàdàn ó jẹ, kí Ṣọ̀ún tìlú Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ náà ó jẹ, kí wọ́n mọ rotate láàrin ara wọn. Àwọn kan wá wòye pé èyí ti jẹ́ kámọ́rì agbẹ́dọ̀ kí odidi Aláàfin tó jẹ́ kó ń lò fún Ìbàdàn ládé kó wá mọ bá wọn jókòó à ń yípo ipò alága àwọn lọ́balọ́ba. Lọ́dún náà ló ń bó ló ṣe rí. Ìgbésẹ̀ wo ni kábíyèsí gbé, bó lọ̀rọ̀ ṣe jẹ́?
Ẹ ṣé olóòtú. Mẹ́rin kọ̀ọ̀kan máa ń pa mí ni pé Aláàfin ló fún Olúbàdàn ládé. Aláàfin kọ́ ló fún Olúbàdàn ládé o. Nínú chief law Oyo State ẹ lọ wò, tí ẹni Olúbàdàn tó bá fẹ́ gbadé, tí wọ́n bá fẹ́ fún anybody ládé, traditional council máa jókòó láti nominate pé nínú àwọn tí ń ṣe báyìí o, kí làwọn rí ṣe sí báyìí o, àwa náà ti tó gbadé. Ẹ rí i pé ìgbà tán nominate adé yẹn kọ́ ni wọ́n gbadé yẹn. Olúbàdàn ti wà látàrí bàbá wa Abbas Alẹ́ṣinlọ́yẹ́ náà ti change baálẹ̀ sí Olúbàdàn, bọ̀ àwọn ò dádé. Ìgbà tó di 1976 láyé bàbá wa Adébímpé lolúbàdàn tó dádé. Olúbàdàn àkọ́kọ́ nìyẹn. Bàbá wa Akínbíyì ni Olúbàdàn ẹ̀kejì tó dádé. Bàbá wa ọba Yúsúfù Olóyèdè Àṣàníkẹ́ ni ọba Olúbàdàn ẹ̀kẹta tó dádé. Nípa ọ̀rọ̀ lọ́balọ́ba tẹ́lẹ̀ sọ yìí, mo fẹ́ lè sọ pé orí bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ náà ló ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ́jọ́ tèmi tá à ń lò lọ́wọ́ yìí.
Ní à ń pínpò alága lọ́balọ́ba ti bẹ̀rẹ̀.
Bẹ́ẹ̀ni.
Bó ló ṣe jẹ́?
Ẹ ṣé. Nígbà náà tẹ́ bá dé palace wa ní Ìdí Aró, rẹ́píkà àga tí bàbá wa ọba Adéyẹmí tó fi máa ń jókòó ní palace wọn ó wà ní palace wa. Èyí túmọ̀ sí pé alájọṣepọ̀ mọ̀rànmọ̀ràn jọ ni wọ́n. Mo fẹ́ lè sọ pé kò sí ìgbà kan láàrin ọ̀sẹ̀ kan tàbí ẹ̀kan méjì láàrin ọ̀sẹ̀ méjì kí bàbá wa Adéyẹmí má dé ọ̀dọ̀ kábíyèsí Àṣàníkẹ́.
Aláàfin tìlú Ọ̀yọ́, ọba Adéyẹmí tó wájà.
Bẹ́ẹ̀ni. Nígbà náà bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ ni ó jẹ́ ẹni tó dàgbà jù láàrin wọn. Táìmì yẹn náà ni bàbá wa Oyèwùmí Ajagungbadé Soun wà lórí ipò. So táìmì yẹn ìtàn tẹ́ béèrè ìtàn ńlá ni o. Old Ọ̀yọ́ làwọn àgbà yẹn o. Ọ̀ṣun state àwọn Òṣogbo kankan wọ́n sì wà London Ọ̀yọ́ state nígbà yẹn.
Ọ̀ṣun àtọ̀yọ́ jọ wà papọ̀ ní.
Wọ́n jọ wà papọ̀ nígbà yẹn ni. Bàbá wa Ọọ̀ni Síjúadé dẹ̀ ni olórí lọ́balọ́ba nípínlẹ̀ Ọ̀yọ́ ńgbà yẹn.
Old Ọ̀yọ́ state.
Ní Old Ọ̀yọ́. Ọọ̀ni of Ifẹ̀ ni olórí lọ́balọ́ba. So wọ́n wá máa ń ṣèpàdé yìí ní ẹ̀ẹ̀kan lóṣù. So ó dijọ́ kan ìpàdé yẹn ti ń bọ̀. Bàbá wa Adéyẹmí kọ́lọ́ ń bá wa fọ̀run kẹ́ wọn. Wọ́n wá bá bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ pé kábíyèsí Olúbàdàn ilẹ̀ Ìbàdàn. Kábíyèsí ní Adéyẹmí ò dénú kí la tó rí gbọ́ sọ ń tọ́ sọ o. Bá mi mo ní wá rí yín fọ̀rọ̀ kan ni.
Lọ́jọ́ orí
Àṣàníkẹ́
ọba Àṣàníkẹ́ ju
dáadáa
ọba Aláàfin tìlú Ọ̀yọ́ lọ.
Dáadáa. First born Àṣàníkẹ́ gan wọ́n fẹ́ lè jọ jẹ́rọ̀ tàbí kan tún jura wọn lọ díẹ̀.
Wọ́n fún wọn ní àpọ́nlé ọjọ́ orí
yẹn. Wọ́n dẹ̀ jẹ́ aláwàdà tán máa ń jọ jálá jọ ṣe. Ẹ rí i pé mo sọ lẹ́ẹ̀kan pé àgàrú tán fi ń jókòó palace yẹn anybody ò dẹ́ ń jókòó ń bẹ̀ kọ̀ǹtìgbà tán Aláàfin bá tó dé. Wọ́n máa ń cover ẹ̀ ni. So bàbá Aláàfin wá sọ fún bàbá Àṣàníkẹ́ pé kábíyèsí ọ̀rọ̀ kan tí mo wá rí yí fún yìí nípa mítìnì lọ́balọ́ba tá a máa ń ṣe gbogbo ọ̀nà láti gba nǹkan kan ẹnì kọ̀ọ̀kan lè máa wá láti Ifẹ̀ láti máa jókòó wájú máa darí ìpàdé fún wa. Kábíyèsí ní ṣe bí ìjọba ṣe tònú ìjọba ló tó bẹ́ẹ̀ bàbá Aláàfin wa ń bẹ Àṣàníkẹ́ pé lóòótọ́ ìjọba ló tó bẹ́ẹ̀ bọ́ ibi tá a ti ń ṣèpàdé ìbò ni kábíyèsí ní sẹkítẹ́ríàtì ní ẹníbo ilé ìjọba sẹkítẹ́ ẹnílùú wo mò ń sọ kábíyèsí dé ẹni o tó dé o Ìbàdàn ní àìná ni ẹ̀gbọ́n tí mo sọnù nílùú bàbá tí wọ́n ṣàbẹ̀rẹ̀ géèmì ẹ̀ bàbá wa ní kí náà fẹ́ náà bá ní ipò lọ́balọ́ba ẹ̀ pé ṣé wọ́n mọ̀ pé ó yẹ káwọn jọ máa rotate ẹ̀ tọ́ọ̀ ní bá jẹ k'Olúbàdàn jẹ káwọn jẹ kí Ṣọ̀ún jẹ bàbá wa láwọn àrònú sí ìgbà tó tún di bíi wọ́n ti wá lẹ́ẹ̀mejì lẹ́yìn ìgbà yẹn wọ́n tún mú bàbá wa Ṣọ̀ún Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ àwọn méjì jọ wá pẹ̀lú àwọn ọba kan lókè Ògùn nígbà yẹn wọ́n tún wá persuade bàbá because in tó dẹ̀ tí mo rí kó fa ilé ni pé wọ́n mọ̀ pé bàbá láyà púpọ̀ kò sí ní tí bàbá ò lè kojú so bá ṣe wá bàbá ní ó dáa ṣe ń tẹ́ fẹ́ nù wọ́n ní bẹ́ẹ̀ ni táìmù yẹn ìpàdé wọn dẹ̀ kú bí ọ̀túnla bàbá ni mo ti gbọ́ wọ́n máa ń bẹ̀rẹ̀ meeting yẹn ní 10 o'clock bàbá ti dé meeting yẹn láfter 7 láàárọ̀ kábíyèsí Àṣàníkẹ́ wá lọ jókòó sórí àga tí Ọọ̀ni of Ifẹ̀ máa ń jókòó lé
wọ́n ti jọ sọ pé ìpàdé ó wáyé
níjọ́
ní House of Chief
ní House of Chief
ìgbà tí kábíyèsí Aláàfin ti dé ọ̀hún
bẹ́ẹ̀ ni
Olúbàdàn ọba Àṣàníkẹ́ àwọn náà ti dọ̀hún àwọn wá lọ jókòó sórí àga tó yẹ kí Ọọ̀ni ti Ilé-Ifẹ̀ jókòó
Olúbàdàn Àṣàníkẹ́ ló kọ́kọ́ jí débẹ̀ wọ́n ti sọ fún Aláàfin pé àwọn ó tètè débẹ̀ bàbá Aláàfin náà ti kó gbogbo ọba Òkè Ògùn pátá àti Ṣọ̀ún gbogbo wọn ti wà ń bẹ̀ so bó ṣe ń tó time pàdé bọ̀ bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ ti jókòó sórí seat tó ní máa ń jókòó sí commissioner of chieftaincy nígbà yẹn ó wá bá kábíyèsí no director ló kọ́ wá bá kábíyèsí pé kábíyèsí ààyè yín mọ̀kànlẹ̀ jókòó sí yẹn bàbá láàyè ta ni o wọ́n láàyè Ọọ̀ni ni kábíyèsí ni Ọọ̀ni kọ́ àǹtà ni báradáradẹ sọ́hún ọ̀rọ̀ búkọ àbí mi bí ẹ ṣe pé lọ pé ọ̀gá ẹ̀ nìyẹn lọ́fíìsì ó lọ pé kọmíṣánná wá bí kọmíṣánná ṣe ń bọ̀ ìwọ ẹni tó bá dẹ̀ mọ̀ bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ dáadáa tí bàbá ò bá fẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ sọ̀rọ̀ ẹ̀ rò pé ó ti sùn lọ ni bàbá máa tó gbé ni bàbá ń ṣe bí ẹni tó ti sùn kọmíṣánná ò lè pa ọlá mọ́ wọn lára because tágbàlagbà bá ń sùn wọn á ló ń dọ́là ni so wọn á lọ wọn ń bọ̀ kò pẹ́ sígbà yẹn bàbá wa Síjú Adé Olúbùṣe wọ́n wọlé dé so lérò gbogbo wọn ni wípé tí Ọọ̀ni bá ti wọlé ó dájú bóyá Àṣàníkẹ́ ń rẹjú lórí síìtì yẹn ni bóyá wọ́n á dìde bọ́ọ̀ ní ṣe wá wọlé lọ́dún náà lọ́hùn bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ sì ń wọ́n ń tó gbé kábíyèsí Ọọ̀ni wá ń kọjá lọ wájú wọn wọ́n ń kọjá bọ̀ ìgbà tó délẹ̀ ìyẹn wọ́n ń wojú gbogbo àwọn officials yẹn pé kí ló ń ṣẹlẹ̀ bọ́n ṣe ń padà bọ̀ lẹ́lẹ́kẹta kábíyèsí Àṣàníkẹ́ kàn fà wọ́n padà ní Síjú Adé ọmọ bàjẹ́ pọ̀ o sọ́pọ̀ rí mi ń jókòó ni ọ̀hà ń parí ìdàdìdà wájú mi ìwádìí jókòó sí abẹ́rẹ́ ìpàdé bàbá wa Aláàfin kan pariwo last minute ṣe hàn pé ọ̀rọ̀ ti wà ńlẹ̀ last minute tí bàbá wọn ní bọ́ wọn bínú jáde padà ni wọn bá wọn jókòó sí ìpàdé yẹn before this drama àwọn officials government wọ́n ti lé gbogbo oníròyìn jáde tó rántí rí pé drama ń bọ̀ even though ọ̀rọ̀ tí mò ń sọ yìí brother mi kan wà tá a ti jọ fi sọ̀rọ̀ rí tán láwọn náà wà nínú pressman tó wà ní palace ìjọ náà àwọn ni press secretary Olúbàdàn Adétúnjì tó rájọ iṣẹ́ pẹ̀lú bàbá Adétúnjì ni brother mi Adéọlá Ọlọ́kọ̀ àwọn ni press secretary bàbá wa ọba Rasheed Adéyàwó náà sí so bí gbogbo bí wọ́n ṣe lọ kábíyèsí Àṣàníkẹ́ jókòó as the chairman jọ yẹn up beside so ìgbà tán lọ tán wọ́n wọ̀nù gbogbo ọba pé kí anybody má address the press so gbogbo ọba jáde ń bẹ̀ yẹn anybody ò bá press sọ̀rọ̀ pọ̀ gbogbo ọba Òkè Ògùn pátá àtàláàfin àti Ṣọ̀ún Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ gbogbo wọn náà tẹ̀lé Àṣàníkẹ́ jáde síta ìgbà tán dẹnu gate tán ti fẹ́ bọ́ta gbogbo oníròyìn bò wọ́n kábíyèsí lẹ́yìn oròyìn tó dénú wọ́n ti ní àmọ́ bá ń sọ nǹkan kan mọ́dá kábíyèsí bó tiẹ̀ ṣe kóró kan ẹ tiẹ̀ sọ fún wa àbá ní kò sí nǹkan kan tó ṣẹlẹ̀ o ju pé látẹ̀ nílò èmi ọba Yésùfù Olóyèdé Àṣàníkẹ́ mo ti da alága ìpínlẹ̀ Ọ̀yọ́ èyí àbá mi bàbá ṣe wọnú mọ́tò ẹ̀ nìyẹn lọ́jọ́ náà lọ́hùn bàbá wa Aláàfin sin kábíyèsí Àṣàníkẹ́délé ibi tí drama yẹn ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ nìyẹn látọdún yẹn bàbá wa Ọọ̀ni of Ifẹ̀ ò wá ṣèpàdé mọ́ l'Ọ̀yọ́ state eléyìí wà lára pọ̀ṣù nítorí fi ń pọ̀ṣù Ọ̀ṣun state pé táwọn bá dúró irú àbùkù yìí kò ní máa tẹ̀síwájú toró ti ní nǹkan kan tó jọ ń pa wọ́n pọ̀ láàrin Aláàfin Ọọ̀ni ní gbogbo ìgbà yẹn bọ̀ bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ jẹ́ ẹnìkan tó yẹ pé ó máa ń tẹ̀lé history tó bá wò sí ṣẹlẹ̀ pé ẹ ṣe báwa la ṣe gbá àwa la ṣàwò ṣe understand bọ́rọ̀ yẹn ṣe wá nìyẹn ìgbà tí bàbá wa délé tán tó wá di bí ọ̀sẹ̀ kejì àbọ̀sẹ̀ kẹta bàbá wa Aláàfin wá wọ́n wá sọ fún ọ pé bó ni ọ̀rọ̀ tó ní àṣẹ àti ṣe o bó láṣẹ wa mọ̀ ṣe ní ìsìn bẹ́ẹ̀ mi bá jẹ tán ìwọ jẹ Ṣọ̀ún ó jẹ bàbá Aláàfin yarí níjọ́ náà lọ́hùn pé Ṣọ̀ún ò ní máa bá wọn rotate. Àṣàníkẹ́ ní kí ló dé wọ́n ní àwọn làwọn tu ilẹ̀ Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ fún Ṣọ̀ún Ajagungbadé ni wọ́n pé so kò sínú ẹ̀tọ́ láti máa jọ rotate Àṣàníkẹ́ rárá o àṣọ́bàǹká tó bẹ̀rẹ̀ eléyìí kọ́kọ́ fàjà láàrin wọn láyé ní táìmù yẹn ó dà pọ́n gbéra wọn lọ sí court bọ̀ǹgbà t'Àṣàníkẹ́ ṣe tán gbélẹ̀ fún bàbá wa Aláàfin táìmù tó yẹ kí ó kan tọ́ọ̀nù bàbá wa Ṣọ̀ún Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ àwọn wà ní Mẹ́kà àwọn lọ sílùú Mẹ́kà.
Ta ló wà Mẹ́kà?
Bàbá wa Ṣọ̀ún Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́.
Ok.
Wọ́n lọ sílùú Mẹ́kà ní bàbá wa Aláàfin àti gọ́vnà tó wà ń gbà yẹn lọ́hùn ṣé Olúrin àbí ta ni gọ́vnà yẹn náà military gọ́vnà tó wà lọ́hùn ní táìmù yẹn lọ́hùn bàbá wa Aláàfin wọ́n ti jọ ní meeting kan tájọ ṣe so táìmù yẹn ni bàbá wa Aláàfin sọra wọn the permanent chairman l'Ọ̀yọ́ state.
dípò àdéhùn pé ẹja máa pín láàrin ara wa tí wọ́n ṣe lẹ́yìn Ọọ̀ni.
bẹ́ẹ̀ni ìgbà tán wá sọ gbólóhùn permanent chairman yìí bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ kò tẹ́ wọn lọ́rùn mọ́ bọ̀ àgbà ti dé bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ wọ́n lọ court against wọn gbà yẹn pẹ̀lú bàbá wa Ṣọ̀ún Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́.
ok.
so ìgbà tó di 1993 ni bàbá wa Àṣàníkẹ́ wàjà ìgbà tán wàjà 1993 bàbá wa tó tún jẹ lẹ́yìn wọn Ọ̀pẹ́rìndé àwọn náà apply fún chairmanship yìí nígbà yẹn kó tó di pé bàbá wa Kálà wá ṣe òfin lórí ẹ̀ wípé kan tó jọ máa rotate kí bàbá wa Aláàfin Adéyẹmí kẹta kan tó lọ court páwọn ò gbà ìgbà tán lọ court páwọn ò gbà yẹn house of chief wà ní suspension mi ìrò kan ti padà up to date house of chief wà ní suspension but bàbá wa Aláàfin sì ń lo permanent chairman yẹn lọ kó tó di pé ní yíyẹ kan torí èmi ní private secretary bàbá Olubadan ìjẹta àbíjẹrin Ajé Ògúnnúsọ.
ok.
so time yẹn a wá ní meeting kan pẹ̀lú bàbá wa Adéyẹmí Aláàfin bàbá Aláàfin wá ń sọ fún time yẹn náà ìjà wà láàrin gọ́vnọ̀ Ajímọ̀bí àti bàbá wa Adétúnjì so bàbá Aláàfin wá ń sọ fún wa lọ́jọ́ náà pé mọ̀ wo gómìnà àwa suspension a ṣe mítìnì ìsìn fún wa lówó oṣù ṣáwa suspension nù. ṣe understand kó tó di pé gómìnà wa ẹlẹ́yinjú àánú gọ́vnọ̀ Ṣèyí Mákindé tún wá wo ọ̀rọ̀ yẹn sìn pé kò yẹ kó máa rí bẹ́ẹ̀ kán jọ wà bí wọ́n ṣe pera wọn padà láti jókòó sí house of chief láti máa ṣèpàdé lọ lẹ́yìn tí he bá jẹ kí bí jẹ kí sis jẹ bọ̀ ọ̀rọ̀ traditional council chairman wọn l'Ọ̀yọ́ state yìí Àṣàníkẹ́ ló ọkọ̀ gbà lọ́wọ́ bàbá wa ni.
nígbà tí gbogbo ọ̀rọ̀ yìí tó bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní rúgbó ìgbà tí wọ́n wá gé Ọ̀ṣun sọ́tọ̀ tí Ọ̀yọ́ dá dúró Ọọ̀ni tí Ilé-Ifẹ̀ wọ́n ti lọ ń jọba tiwọn tí ò sẹ́ni ó bá wọn dùn mọ́ láàrin Aláàfin Olúbàdàn àti Ṣọ̀ún ǹjẹ́ wọ́n sì ń padà jọ ń sọ̀rọ̀ papọ̀ ìhà wo ni ọjọ́ ń kọ síra wọn.
wọ́n sì padà jọ ń sọ̀rọ̀ papọ̀ bọ̀ látìgbà tí gọ́vnà Akálà ṣe hàn pé 1991 náà dá Ọ̀ṣun state sílẹ̀.
bẹ́ẹ̀ni.
After 1991 wọ́n ti wà ń court kí bàbá Ṣàníkẹ́ tó kú, so ọ̀rọ̀ tó bá dẹ̀ wà ń court ṣe hàn pé wọn kì í dá sí i. ṣe understand ìyẹn ló fa long reign chairman tí bàbá wa Aláàfin wà lórí ẹ̀, because tọ́rọ̀ bá ṣì wà ń court wọn lè ṣe nǹkan kan lórí ọ̀rọ̀ yẹn. so n tó ṣẹlẹ̀ ni
títí tí wọ́n fi wá yanjú rẹ̀ báyìí.
wọ́n fi yanjú ẹ̀ báyìí.
tó túmọ̀ sí pé kábíyèsí Aláàfin ìlú Ọ̀yọ́ gan-an ló initiate gbogbo plan yìí.
ó yẹ káwọn ọjọ́ máa pín jẹ, kábíyèsí Aláàfin ló bẹ̀rẹ̀.
ó túmọ̀ sí pé bàbá ọba Yusuf Ṣàníkẹ́ gan o wọn rò tàbí wò pé bóyá àwọn tiẹ̀ lè jálága ẹ̀ rárá.
kò sí, àwọn believe pé n tíjọba bá ti ṣe ni nígbà yẹn pé ṣe bíjọba ló ṣe, but ìgbà tí bàbá wa Aláàfin wa fi lọ̀ wọ́n kó yẹ káwọn ọjọ́ máa jẹ́ ni ló mú ìgbésẹ̀ tí bàbá wa Ṣàníkẹ́ gbé ńgbà yẹn.
One comment section said, now, to be honest, if you check any official records, you will actually discover that the official record was that Ooni was chairman of the House of Chiefs until 1991, when Oyo State was created. That's the official record. But in actual fact, he stopped going to that meeting after what this man described happened. He stopped going. But officially, I'm not one in charge of, but unofficially, Oyo and Ibadan were fighting over it. I want to read something to you before I play something from the new Olubadan on the matter of rotating chairmanship. So I'm going to read from an article by, it's from the Liberation News. I'm going to start from the beginning because of time. It says here, despite ganging up with few other obas like Soun of Ogomosho, Olubadan of Ibadan, Owo of Ile-Ife in leading a revolt calling for the rotation of chairmanship position of Oyo State Council of Obas from its permanent position of Ooni of Ile-Ife, Oba Lamidi Adeyemi never succeeded. However, at the creation of Oyo State and the exit of Ooni from Oyo State to newly created Oyo State, the opportunity finally presented itself for Alaafin to be the chairman of Oyo State Council of Obas and Chiefs. Having forgotten the earlier unwholesome alliance with the Obas mentioned above for rotational chairmanship, he occupied the office. Unfortunately, after the expiration of his 2 years tenure, and Olubadan of Ibadan was to occupy the seat as per their previous agreement before the exit of Ooni, the Alaafin reneged on the agreement and resigned from the council because he couldn't stand seeing Olubadan Oyo, who were promoted from Baale in 1977 to Oba, to be presiding over meetings where he would be present. With all of the above and records available at the National Archives, interested people are free to their opinions and to change the gazette on this issue or legal option can be resorted to. Here's the point. What made Oba Lamidi Adeyemi do the things he did? Now, I'm going to ask some questions. I'm not going to make a statement. I'm just going to ask a few questions. Could it be, in fact, just one question, could it be that it was motivated by what happened to his father? Which is not clear. Can you hear me? Is it clear? Is it better now? Okay, that's fine. So here's the thing. Here's the question I wanted to ask. Could it be what happened to Oba Adeyemi the first that made Oba Adeyemi the second do the things he did? Could it be? Could it be that it was? And then could it also? And then could the other question would be that, was it ambition or something else that will make him say, no, it shouldn't just be the Ooni? That was the first time we began to have issues with this Alaafin Ooni thing. It started in the 1980s, late 1980s mid to late 1980s. It was more personal than institutional. The Alaafin that's there right now is taking on the whole thing as if it's an institutional beef. It is not institutional. It was personal. And you would expect that those who are leading us will be more concerned with the development of their land than to inherit people's beefs, especially when the person who started the beef decided to change his mind towards in the twilight of his time on earth. He changed his views. Thankfully, and by the way, that's to his credit. He changed his views. And you saw the relationship between him and Ooni Ogunwusi. It wasn't the same thing that he had with Ooni Shojuade. So it was a personal issue. And it was, I mean, this Ooni made sure that he did not inherit that thing. So, bí gbọ́dọ̀ pé báyìí máa ń sọ ní Níjẹ̀bú àfìdípọ̀ tẹ̀mọ́lẹ̀ ọ̀pọ̀ tẹ̀yàmọ́lẹ̀. The Alaafin that just got there, it's not even up to 1 year. He has inherited a personal beef as if it is an institutional issue. There's nothing between the thrones, or there's no comparison. There's no beef, there's no competition, there's no basis for competition. What is just happening? I mean, you heard that. By the way, Okpo, we'll be bringing out one by one. This one is from how the whole issue of Ooni cannot be the only king that's the permanent chairman. Here's the crazy part. After he took over, guess what he wanted to do? To become the permanent chairman of Oyo State Council of Chiefs of Obas. After they were able to say, oh, let's get Ooni out of the way, and they now got there, he now wanted to become the same thing that he was complaining about. Which is why the Soun has spoken up. I mean, the one that was there, Obajagungbade, was talking. Olubadan has spoken up. And in case you have not heard them or heard anything about it, I'm going to play something to you from Olubadan. This, for me, is just to tell you about people that all these young people insulting Ooni on social media, number one, you are daft. Number two, you don't even know what you are fighting. It has nothing to do with the stool. And yes, if you insult Ooni, you are daft. I don't care who you are. I'm going to play you something from Ladoja on this matter of who is the chairman of the Council of Chiefs in Oyo State. So at least you have an idea how the whole thing happened now. Like I always say, I'm trying to find the particular point. Like I always say, regardless of what you say about what Lamidi Adeyemi did, at least towards the end, he tried to course correct, so to speak. He had to correct his course, and that's something you have to acknowledge. But don't show column of Yorubaland, and you're wondering, who are these people? There's something about age, there's something about authority, there's something about the throne. That throne is not for beef. It's not for beef. It's not. Number one, you can't even be asking if you are bigger than your great grandfather. Oh, no, it's not even the grandfather, it's the great grandfather. You can't be. To ask that question is you are disrespecting yourself. So there's nothing to even compare, to even start with. But all this nonsense. Anyway, I want to play something from the Olubadan. Yeah. This was even before Kiwaba to bọ́ sórí àpẹẹrẹ. Ẹ̀gbọ́n nǹkan tí Ọba Rashidi Adéwọ̀lú Ládọjà nǹkan tán sọ. Ẹ gbọ́.
Nígbà tí náà fẹ́ ṣe chairman ọmọ president House of Chiefs and rotation àfẹ́ ẹni ìtàn sọ pé Aláàfin náà sọ pé kìnìkan kò lè ta fẹ́ ṣe sìn House of Assembly là ń gbé bíìlì lọ. Sọ tán pé bàbá mi ṣe nǹkan báyìí ní bọ́dà ìsọ́sìn. Nítorí ọ̀gá náà fẹ́ ṣe abúlé. Mo ní ẹ má gbàgbé o. 32 members ló wà ní house o. Speaker kan wà láàrin wọn o. Sábà máa dìbò speaker ò ní dìbò. 16 nínú 32 lání o. Pẹ̀lú support sí àwọn house of assembly dẹ́n fún wa. Tàbá ní bíbá nìkan dìbò ṣe gbèsè wọ́n jù sínú. Oníṣòwò kí ẹ sọ fún oníkan lọ sọ fọ́lá fi hàn pé tí bàtà bá fẹ́ máa jẹ́ permanent chairman àwọn lámà jẹ́ o. Àníbò tá a lè fi gbé àti pé.
what's Kabisi saying here? He's saying that they're talking about how they're going to be rotating the chairmanship. And some people are saying in history somebody was empire, and he said it doesn't really matter what happened. Going forward, this is how we're going to do it. And then he reminded them that 32 seats in the Oyo State Parliament, there is one speaker. So you have 31 people left. Of those 31 seats, 16 are in Ibadan. So he's saying if Ibadan wants to be the permanent chairman, they can do it in the House of Assembly because they're the ones that will make the decision. In other words, the idea of rotate. Sherry, let me tell you something about life. Please, if you want, even if you have to change the order, I'll say that number one, respect the order that your ancestors have created, the structure. Even if you want to change that structure, don't do it by belittling your forebears. You can change things. I mean, life is dynamic, culture is dynamic, right? Even the things that our fathers did, they also changed some of the things that their own fathers did. Every generation has to get better. You have to be open to innovation, right? Your father stupid. Once you do that, you have given every generation coming after you, all the successive generations, you have given them the right to call you stupid. Why did I say that? Nobody would have thought of even arguing about the permanent chairmanship of Oyo State with the Alaafin if the Alaafin had not tried to remove the Ooni in the 1980s. No one will even think of it. Because, okay, why would you want to? So you want to change the order, but you're going to change the order by belittling your forebears. What you have done is that you have given everybody the right to make sure that when you get there, not only will they question you, they will use the law against you and your own forebears and tell them that, listen, no, we have 16 representatives in the House of Assembly in Oyo State, and those people can vote to keep us there permanently. What are you going to do? Wallahi, kò sí nǹkan tó wà ṣe. Me think, oh, listen, that's why you have to be. I mean, this is not about just history. In our own personal lives as well. If your parents have done something, people say things that my father should have done. If you are more than 18 years and you're still crying about what your father should have done, you need help. Oh. My father could not have done something. If he had done something, my dad doesn't know how to think. My father is not a good planner. My father, you may be right. You may be right. But I don't care what you do for your children. And the funny thing, I learned this thing, of course, as a parent. You cannot no matter how good you are, there will be something that even you know that, oh boy, I could have done that thing better. So that means that the next generation will probably build on it and make it better. But nobody has the right to curse his parents and say, see what they did. And by the way, you may be right too. That's the funny thing about life. You may even be very correct. But to share, to fi sọ fún ọ pé àwọn ẹni iwájú yẹn orí wọn ò pé kàn yọ wọ́n kúrò ó fẹ́ ṣe rotational chairmanship. Nígbà tí ó wá débẹ̀ wá fẹ́ di permanent chairman, àwọn tó ń bọ̀ lẹ́yìn máa bèèrè lọ́yẹ̀ pé ṣé o pé àwọn gan ni. A máa rotate kíní ni. Kíní kan empire, sọ́sápọ̀ ẹ̀. The only empire we know is Empire State Buildings in New York. Kò matter.